Hey gang, it is our second week of our 1102 course. This week you all have a William Faulkner story and an Alice Walker story to read. Faulkner, I believe, is A Rose for Emily, and then we have Alice Walker, Everyday Use. So we'll discuss those stories maybe a little bit next week's video. From last week, you guys had the discussion board on the three excerpts, the Chuang Tzu, the Aesop fable, and the piece from the Brothers Grimm. So it was really interesting to see what you guys had to say in the discussion board. I found that really rewarding to see your responses. I think you guys really keyed in on the unifying thread of those three excerpts. Some of you said that it came down to decision making and choice and the kind of the gravity that underlies certain choices that we make in life, as you guys saw evident in those stories. And I thought that was a really keen insight, especially because choices really do kind of carry with them some kind of a moral underpinning, or some ethical calculation we have to make, especially if it's a really major life decision. The things that we see going on in the stories having to do with tradition, culture, things of that stripe. So, personal agency. Think about, this is why we tell stories. Stories aren't just there, and I put this on the blog too. Stories aren't just there to entertain. That might be one reason for storytelling. You guys can think of all sorts of different entertaining stories. Harry Potter, the phenomenon that is Harry Potter, that's been hugely popular for the past 20 plus years or so. So I haven't read any of the books, but I've seen the movies, each one several times. And think about how that story carries with it sort of classic conventions of the hero, and the odds that he has to face, the villain, how there's a light and a dark side in all of us. It's actually a lot of pretty heavy hitting themes in there, below the surface of the fun entertainment and the Quidditch and the wizardry and all the hijinks that Harry and his friends get into. There's actually a pretty serious message there being put forth. Ultimately, that we all have a light and a dark side, and we have to reconcile those two things to get ourselves in order and to understand ourselves fully. So see if you could find these kind of universal themes that we read in the stories that we read. There's a reason why we started with story, narrative in 1101. And most of that had to do with you all telling your own story, or a story about a loved one or a close friend. Because stories are universal. It's the most human thing that we do: tell, read, write stories. And I think there is that kind of morality baked into the cake of storytelling. Lessons that are taught, sometimes not all the time explicitly. In the Aesop fable, and really in the other two as well that we read last week, there is kind of an explicit moral. Fables have morals explicitly. But most of the time, stories imply their message, or there's some thesis or moral, or that's kind of, you need to kind of read in between the lines, or the subtext, or you have to kind of interpret the story to kind of tease out its meaning. So see if you can do that in the Faulkner and Walker pieces, and each piece that we read thereafter. So the blog this week is. And I'm going to do this for the blog each week, this half of the term. I'm just going to ask you all to give you your general comments, impressions. Did you like the story? Did you not like the story? It's just a place where it's not formal. Of course, it is going to accrue as bonus points. So, of course, you want to kind of monitor what you're saying, make sure you're being professional and coherent and all of that. But you kind of let your hair down and just say, hey, I didn't like this story, or I thought it was X, Y, and Z. whatever the case may be, just make sure you're supporting your answer, your thoughts, substantiating your thoughts with substantive supporting details, just like in everything that you do writing in 1101 and now in 1102. So for this week, I'm going to have your research version for your argument and persuasive essay. That's going to come back to you. But for this, the grading is going to be a little different. At least the way that I'm going to calculate the grade is going to look a little different. I'm not calculating the grade differently, like mentally. I'm reading your work and making sure you're adhering to the spirit of the assignment based on what I asked you to do and all of that. That's not going to change. But the way I'm going to report the grade to you is going to look a little different. It's going to be a little mini rubric. So I've decided for the final assignment in 1101, this research essay for argument and persuasion, this and the final essay we write in 1102, which is going to be a research essay on Shakespeare's Othello. This will also have the same grade reporting look. It's going to be a little rubric, a 5-point rubric. It'll say something like states clear defendable thesis, X out of 20. Okay, each is worth 20 points. 20 times 5, 100. Next point, and this is, I'm going from memory here. It might not be in this literal order when you see your grade, but states clear defendable thesis, X out of 20 points. Substantiates defends thesis with textual evidence, meaning sources are there. Okay, or the next one, MLA conventions are adhered to, grammar and punctuation, X out of 20. So I'm looking to make sure that you do the correct MLA documentation style. Your sources, the author's last name, the page number in parenthetical citation. Quotation marks are where they're supposed to be. Periods are where they're supposed to be. If you have a block quote, meaning you've quoted prose text of, I believe it's 3 lines or more, 4 lines or more, it's in a block quote. Should you have used a block quote? Maybe you didn't. Just an example. So adhering to MLA conventions and grammar and punctuation, I'm going to put in that same heading, that same category as well. Has a logically, coherently structured essay, meaning your paragraphs make sense. Each one is about something. Transitions between paragraphs, that they're there, that it's a fluid read, okay? So what you're not going to see this time, to kind of summarize here and to put a finer point on it, you won't see the point-by-point little marginal comments that I've had in your other essays. This is going to be more of a general, global, hey, did you satisfy the big 5, okay? States a clear thesis, defends thesis, MLA conventions, you're using supporting details, evidence to support your thesis, and structure and organization. Okay, so I'm going to be looking for that. Okay, I'm going to look at your thesis. Is it clear? Is it a thesis? Is it an arguable point? And is it a statement? Is that there? Yes, and it's completely 100% golden. 20 out of 20, 19 out of 20, perhaps 18 out of 20. And then, of course, they all add up to 100. Okay, so this is also a way to kind of expedite the process, because the 1101 shell is going to close. Our online coordinator was nice enough to leave it open for us for a little while longer. So what you see after I report this grade to you guys, that's going to be basically your final 1101 grade. Okay, and now I still have to allocate the bonus points from the blogs from 1101. So you guys know how many blog posts you did. Okay, so you could expect some of your other essay grades to maybe go up a few ticks, because I'm going to add the blog points onto, let's say, your lowest, the assignment on which you performed the lowest or the least, the essay. So if you did really badly on the narrative, what I might do is take the blog post points and add them to your narrative, or add them to your descriptive, or whatever the one you need the most help with. Okay, so I'll try to think of an equitable, fair way of doing that. But suffice it to say, after you find your grade from this final essay, you could go in the grade book, look at your total and the total weighted column, and what you see there pretty good indicator of what you're going to come out with at the end of 1101. And I'm not going to report the 1101 grades until the end of the term along with 1102. Just the way I do it. So that is that. Go ahead and look at the announcement for this week. You guys have the 2 stories to read. The assignment is in there in Blackboard. Contribute to the blog if you want to keep on racking up bonus points throughout the term. The blog last week was interesting. I made the kind of provocative case that without art, without fiction, without storytelling, life wouldn't really have much meaning. And I didn't mean that in a total bleak, depressing sense in that I don't know, did I? Maybe I did. Think about it. If you didn't have, and I'm talking about movies here too, movies and television. These are artistic media as well, right? So I'm not just talking about, tedious books and poems and the things we have to do in class here, okay? No one really reads anymore. That's just a phenomenon. Reading is too time consuming, passe. We have our Snapchat and our Twitter and all that instant gratification stuff to give us the goods right then and there. So people aren't really reading as much as they used to. So I'm not just talking about reading, but I'm talking about art, visual art, photography even. Imagine if you didn't have any of that, okay? If you just dispensed with that utterly. So no movies, no television, no Netflix, no YouTube, okay? Artistic media, no performance, okay? I think literature is kind of one of the best manifestations, one of the most resonant and important manifestations of the arts. That's my personal opinion. But imagine you didn't have art in general, okay? How meaningful would life be? Not pleasant to think about, but probably not terribly pleasant, okay? I responded to one student in one of the blogs who challenged me on that point, and I took the challenge, and I thought it was very well stated that, all that art stuff, all that frou-frou stuff is fine. It's entertainment. And I might be bastardizing what the student had said. I think it was Sexton was the student's name. So correct me if I'm wrong. Something like, the practical applications, the sciences, the engineering, nursing, doing things with your hands. After all, we're talking about a high school that is preparing you all for technical fields, more the hands-on trades, jobs that give you the result when you could see the fruits of your labor. And I appreciate those jobs too. And I still have those types of jobs that I still work, as a matter of fact. The more practical-minded jobs, these are the things that maybe are more important or are certainly more practical, but and it reminded me of a Robin Williams quote from the movie The Dead Poets Society, where he said, and I'm kind of paraphrasing the quote, the arts, the sciences, all of these things are important. They're necessary to sustain life. But without art, without poetry, music, what would there be to live for? So that was in the spirit of last week's blog, as we're kind of talking about reading stories and interpreting stories, much more of an emphasis on sort of artistic interpretation of our subjects, whereas 1101 was more about argumentation and different modes of rhetoric, different ways of expressing ourselves. This is when we're focusing primarily on stories and poems and drama, the arts, okay, the written word, that part of the arts at least. So we are continuing to sally forth, and I look forward to more of your contributions, more of your interesting interpretations, your participation, folks. It's been great so far. Keep it up. Don't slack off. Let's keep going, guys. Let's finish strong. The semester's going to end sooner than you think. It's already, mid-March? So, man, time is flying by. Anyway, guys, at the expense of rambling on more, I'm going to go ahead and wish you a great week 2 now in 1102. And don't you forget, Hakuna Matata. Bye-bye.